Company introductory tape is the very first episode of the WALTIN Files, a compilation of 3 tapes that introduce the public to Bunny Smiles Incorporated and Bond's Burgers for the very first time. But they also plunge us into the strange and eerie events.
This is Bree's workspace, and this is Bree's brain trying to keep track of it all. It's not entirely
Events surrounding both entities. Before diving into the actual video, the description already gives us some interesting context. It includes a message from someone named Anthony, which reads,
"This is a compilation of tapes created by the already extinct Bunny Smiles company. I tried to get as much info as I could about what these tapes are. All I could find was that these tapes were handed to new employees back in 1974-1979. The rest of the tapes seem to be recorded by a new facility caretaker in the year 1982. Hopefully I can find more tapes soon."
Things start off strangely, just as you'd expect. Before the first tape even begins, we see a brief shot of a rabbit wandering through a forest. Then it cuts to the actual intro video, a corporate training tape meant to welcome new support and maintenance technicians at BSI, Bunny Smiles Incorporated. We're given an overview of what to expect from our new job, our responsibilities, and how to properly handle company equipment. Soon after, we're introduced to Bond's Burgers, a family-friendly fast food restaurant with an entertainment area for kids, headlined by a group of animatronic performers known as the Showstoppers, Bond, Shaw, Buzu, and Banny. The narrator explains our role as a facility caretaker, listing duties such as cleaning protocols, robot maintenance and repairs, and how to operate company tech. However, something odd happens. When the narrator mentions robot maintenance and repairs, his voice suddenly drops in pitch. It's subtle, but definitely unsettling. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but it almost feels like a hint, like there's something very wrong with these animatronics. Next, we're shown the founders of the company, Jack Walton and Felix Kranken, along with a short message from the two of them. It's a warm and cheerful moment, one that starkly contrasts what comes next. The narrator then announces that Bond's Burgers will be opening in a few weeks, and that they're excited to make their dreams come true with you. But suddenly, the tape becomes corrupted. We see a cartoon version of Bond glitching alongside distorted footage. What follows is an instructional segment on the K9 storage facility located in Santa Juana Forest. This facility is used to store valuable items from Bond's Burgers, which, believe it or not, was permanently shut down in the very same year it opened due to certain incidents that occurred there. Then, the screen fades to black, and a cartoon drawing of a gray rabbit appears, a character whose identity we'll learn about later. The rabbit says something, but the audio is reversed. If we flip it, here's what we get.
"You finally start to remember. Back all day. They will be back for you soon. Sophie."
As we'll see throughout the series, these interruptions weren't part of the original tape. What we're witnessing is the appearance of an unknown entity that distorts and hijacks the footage to send a message to someone named Sophie, a key character we'll meet later on. The second tape in this first video takes the form of an episode from a 1979 children's show called Little Bond's Neighborhood, produced by the same company. The episode is titled Bond's Super Sleepover and was made by Sunlight Animation. Little Bond is planning a sleepover and movie night with his friends, Shaw, Buzu, and a new character we've never seen before, a clown named Billy. But something strange happens. As Bond checks his guest list, Billy's face suddenly vanishes and is replaced by a distorted image of Jack Walton. The background darkens and Bond's eyes disappear. A curious detail here is that even though Bond says he's invited all his friends, Banny is nowhere to be seen. Later tapes will reveal that Bond actually finds the animatronic rabbit's personality irritating and stressful. The cartoon shifts back to a cheerful tone, and Bond's friends arrive at his house. He gets ready to play a fun movie he bought. However, the VHS cover is anything but fun. It shows Jack Walton's face along with an upside-down title that seems to read Home Video. Then we see Bond and the others watching the film, but instead of a movie, the screen shows a cryptic message. "Let me out of here." There's also a bottle of pills next to the TV prescribed to Sophie Walton, the name mentioned earlier by the gray rabbit, Jack Walton's eldest daughter. The tape glitches again. When it resumes, the characters are in their sleeping bags. Bond wakes up after hearing strange noises coming from the kitchen and decides to investigate. As he glances toward the living room, the TV turns on by itself, displaying a missing person poster, Jack Walton, who vanished under mysterious circumstances.
A CRM shouldn't set your teams back.
On June 11th, 1974. All of this happens while distorted sounds and faint cries echo in the background. Bond finds a lighter on the floor and tries to ignite it several times, until he finally does. But in that exact moment, it vanishes, and instead, we see Sophie dressed in a Bunny Smiles maintenance uniform. Behind her, the Bond animatronic, worn out, torn, and riddled with holes, stares at her in a chilling silence. The footage cuts abruptly, jumping straight to the third and final tape. This one revolves around Brian Stells, a new facility caretaker sent in 1982 to the old Bunny Smiles K9 storage facility. He explains that he's recording everything as part of company protocol and mentions having been driving around for 20 minutes, completely lost, trying to find the place. Brian finally arrives. The facility has been inactive since the late 70s. Inside, he comes across 3 photos. One of Felix Kranken, one of a group of employees, and another of 2 young children, Jack Walton's other kids, Ed and Molly. Soon, a terrible stench fills the room. Brian then discovers something else, the old, severely damaged Bond animatronic. He tries using a remote control to test if it still works, noticing that the left arm appears to be broken. But suddenly, everything is interrupted when Bond starts moving on its own and laughing maniacally.
What was that thing?
What follows is a short CGI animation of a white human mask, morphing and shifting shapes. This is most likely Bond's facial recognition system attempting to identify Brian. The final scene shows Brian's lifeless body on the ground as 2 phrases appear on screen. "I can't feel anything," and "He thought I was her." But who is her? You might remember the earlier scene where Sophie appears wearing a maintenance uniform. What we're seeing here is likely a reinterpretation of what we just witnessed, only this time from Bond's perspective. He's confusing Brian for Sophie, which leads us to an unsettling question. Why does Bond want to kill Sophie? Finally, we see Brian Stell's ID card, followed by a photo of Jack Walton, one that's sure to send chills down your spine, as Claire de Lune plays softly in the background. Considering everything we've seen so far, and the story this series draws inspiration from, many might think Jack Walton's spirit is trapped inside the Bond animatronic. But things are far more complicated than that. I've prepared an exclusive section in this video to explore this in depth. Jack Walton is one of the most mysterious characters in the WALTIN files, so let's not get ahead of ourselves. The second episode in the series, titled Relocate Project, presents us with a new compilation of tapes related to the relocation efforts for Bond's Burgers. But before diving into the analysis, we're once again greeted with a message from Anthony.
This is another compilation of tapes from Bunny Smiles Incorporated. I was able to contacting people via forums and threads that have some information of the company. These tapes revolve around some relocation project that was being executed during the late 70s. A BSI ex-employee mentioned that these tapes were really private, and only a few people had a copy of them. Once the company vanished during the early 80s,
Is that gunfire I'm hearing?
Well, it ain't popcorn.
all tapes regarding the project were banned and destroyed. These are super rare, and I'm really lucky to have them.
The first tape outlines the plans to relocate Bond's Burgers 4 years after the original restaurant shut down on July 20th, 1974. The narrator explains that the relocation project was a backup plan devised by Felix Kranken, and it took 4 years of legal procedures to make it happen. Through an 8-bit animation, we see the animatronics and props being moved to a storage facility deep within the Santa Juana forest, something we already knew. In the animation, a worker is seen loading supplies onto a truck, and as the screen darkens, it's revealed that the driver is none other than Jack Walton. The narrator goes on to say that several products were created based on the animatronics: books, merchandise, animated films, and a children's TV show. One of these, as you may have guessed, was Little Bond's Neighborhood, which became a massive success. But what really stands out is a VHS tape box among the merchandise titled The Disappearance of Jack Walton. The narrator continues, saying that the success of these products inspired Felix to restore the animatronics and reopen a brand new Bond's Burgers in 1982. He even praises Felix, showing a cartoon version of him surrounded by happy kids. But then something unsettling happens. As the narrator says, a man with not only a giant brain, but also a giant heart. The video cuts to a dark, silent image of Jack Walton, smiling. It's clear, something went very, very wrong between these two. The second tape documents the reprogramming process of the animatronics to update and prepare them for the grand reopening. The first phase involves programming facial expressions, and Banny is used as the example. The narrator explains that the results should be similar for the rest of the animatronics. First, she opens and closes her mouth, a function that already existed. Then, a new feature is added: blinking. Banny is said to use these expressions to convey emotions or to look for friends, referring to customers. But as she looks around, the background fades to black, and a haunting face overlays her own, strongly suggesting that Banny is being possessed by a human soul. The scene changes. Banny is now in a square room with 3 doors. She tries to open each one, but no matter which she chooses, she always ends up back in the same place. A voice is heard saying that she's trapped in a cage, and that she needs to get the owner's attention. The voice repeats over and over, "The bunny rabbit needs to get out. The rabbit is starving." Eventually, Banny gives up. She stands silently in the center of the room, black tears streaming from her eyes, just like we saw with Bond. Then the video shifts again to black and white footage of wild jackrabbits running through an open field, with Lacrimosa playing in the background. This moment is important, so keep it in mind. One of the future episodes in the Walton Files shares the same name. What we're seeing here is a historical event, a massive jackrabbit hunt during the Dust Bowl. The Dust Bowl was a series of devastating dust storms in the 1930s that hit the Midwest United States, triggered by severe drought, poor farming practices, and strong winds. It destroyed millions of acres of farmland, turned soil into dust, and forced countless families to abandon their land. But that's not all. During the Dust Bowl, something strange happened. Massive plagues of jackrabbits. With no natural predators left and the ecosystem disrupted, their population exploded. With crops dying from the drought, jackrabbits fed on whatever was left, destroying the remaining food supply. Desperate, starving farmers began organizing mass jackrabbit hunts. Hundreds of people gathered to corral them into cages and kill them with sticks or firearms. There was nothing left, and the jackrabbits became just another threat to their survival.
Yeah, AI chatbots are actually super exciting, but I'm sorry, we'd rather not introduce them. They just don't seem secure.
Back in the present, we now see the worn, damaged version of Banny as she looks today. The image darkens, leaving only her silhouette against a black background. Her face slowly moves closer to the screen until it's replaced by an image of a purple rabbit trapped inside a birdcage. Finally, we see a barely visible missing person poster. It belongs to Susan Woodings, the lead technician at Bunny Smiles. And just like that, we learn the identity of the soul trapped inside the Banny animatronic. What we've just witnessed is a representation of the suffering that Susan is enduring within the animatronic, trying again and again to escape and call for help, but always failing. trapped in a cold metal cage from which there is no way out. The third tape takes the form of a tutorial for support technicians working at the K9 storage facility. Our guide is Shaw, who reminds us that we must always wear the official Bunny Smiles uniform and carry an employee ID card. Her explanation is suddenly cut off as the screen briefly flashes Brian Stell's ID card. When things return to normal, we see Shaw helping little Bond get ready to enter the facility, making sure he has the following items: a flashlight, a snack, a key, and a camera. However, just as Bond turns to the viewer to introduce the last item, the background darkens, and we see Jack Walton's face peeking out from inside Bond's backpack. Once inside the facility, Shaw warns us to remember the rooms we pass through, as it's easy to get lost. When leaving the break room, a shadow that appears vaguely human flashes across the screen. Shaw enters the storage area and begins explaining the purpose of each section, but she's suddenly interrupted when she reaches the third door. And let me tell you now, nothing good lies behind that third door. In the main storage room, Shaw says something in reverse. When the audio is flipped, we hear the following story.
Rosemary would go to the restaurant every night hoping that his beloved husband would reappear after being missing for weeks, but no response until one day she heard a voice saying, "I know where she is, Rosie," coming from the backstage.
After this eerie moment, Shaw asks us to follow her into the animatronic storage room. She warns us not to touch them or shine light on them unless we're certified technicians, but then Shaw returns to the storage room crying and remembering in horror that she's been in that room before. She tries to go back to the previous room, but the strange black silhouette appears again, blocking her path. The scene becomes distorted, red hues filling the screen as Shaw sobs even harder. We see her again in the storage room, now whispering.
"Sophie, where am I?"
Her body begins flickering back and forth between her own and that of another woman, Rosemary. The poster of Shaw in the background is replaced with one of Rosemary, and the name Sophie is repeated over and over in reverse. Rosemary finally appears on screen as Shaw's voice continues narrating the story we heard earlier, and we are now shown the grotesque and horrifying fate of this poor woman.
By the time the lady entered the backstage, as the voice told her to, missing husband wasn't there. Instead, she found a rabbit.
Rose broken will fix you. You will beautiful. You will beautiful. You will beautiful.
When she woke up, she looked beautiful. But on the inside,
Every single part of her body was bleeding out.
Let me give you some context. Rosemary was Jack Walton's wife and the mother of Sophie, Edward, and Molly Walton. She was an extremely loving woman, but also intimidating when necessary. She adored her children with all her heart. However, after Jack's disappearance, she completely changed. She became sad, depressed, and extremely overprotective. From that point on, Rosemary started visiting the restaurant every night, hoping Jack would come back. But one night, she heard a voice calling out, saying it knew where her husband was, and asking her to follow. She did. But when Rosemary entered the backstage, she didn't find Jack. She found the infamous Bond animatronic. And in that very room, reserved for employees only, Bond brutally ended her life. Her remains were later placed inside the Shaw animatronic, possessing it in the process. And now we reach the fourth and final tape in this second installment of the series. This footage was recorded.
If you manage a team of shift-based workers, then you need RotaCloud. RotaCloud is an all-in
by 3 Bunny Smiles technicians who volunteered to spend 3 days and nights inside the facility to reprogram the animatronics, Hillary, Ashley, and Kevin. Once inside, they find the deteriorated versions of Shaw and Bond, and begin discussing whether it's still possible to repair them for the relocation project. Hillary believes the damage is too severe, but more importantly, she suspects someone intentionally damaged them. As the group prepares to sleep, Ashley mentions they were given a small key by the company, but no explanation as to what it's for. She wants to investigate, but the others insist they should focus on fixing the animatronics. The next morning, Kevin summarizes the project and admits that it was a failure. The animatronics are far too damaged, and they simply don't have the time or resources to repair them. He asks the company for an extension. Meanwhile, Ashley secretly starts a new recording. She's determined to figure out what the key unlocks, believing it might be the only way to save the project. Eventually, she discovers that the key opens a door labeled Back Doors, which leads to multiple hidden rooms. Inside, she finds replacement parts, detached heads, and a strange gray rabbit. Yes, the same one we saw in the very first tape. But the most important moment comes when Ashley enters the final room. There, she finds the Billy animatronic. Something about it deeply unsettles her, so she decides not to approach. Instead, she notices a strange tape dated June 11th from some year in the 1970s. She inserts it into the player built into Billy. A birthday song plays, before suddenly cutting off. And then a list of names is spoken: Jack, Susan, Charles, Rosemary, and Sophie. Suddenly, Ashley's flashlight dies. When she finally gets it working again, Bon is standing right in front of her. A brief message flashes on screen explaining what happened the next morning after Ashley's death. They left the next day. They thought Ashley left early, but she was in the back doors, screaming as much as she could. But no one heard the screams. The following days, the caretakers would complain about an awful smell coming from the back doors. The company decided to shut down the facility until new advice. The relocate project was unsuccessful. Ashley is still there, but she's not screaming anymore. She saw something she wasn't supposed to see. And now, she is beautiful. Once the credits finish, a voice is heard whispering,
"Shadow Man sees me when lights go off."
And then, we're shown an image of Bunny Farm, a video game that will play a major role in the third part of this series. The showstoppers stand in front of a barn, but behind a tree, a mysterious figure watches from the distance. Lucky You is a hidden video from the Relocate project, which can only be accessed by piecing together the two parts of a secret link shown throughout the second episode. The tape begins innocently enough, with the classic Bon's Burgers logo, but what follows is a visual journey through key dates. Fragments of history told through images. The restaurant opened its doors on June 28, 1974, and the first birthday party held inside took place just 2 days later, on June 30th. Then, between July 10th and 19th, the final shows were performed before the restaurant permanently shut down on July 20th. By October 31st, the restaurant is seen abandoned and boarded up. On December 10th, we're shown the K9 storage facility. Later, on June 23, 1975, the animatronics are transported to this Bon's Burgers storage location, and finally, we're shown a curious date, June 11, 1974, a date before the grand opening. And yet, nothing is shown. The screen remains empty. Then, the mysterious figure we briefly saw.
Hitting your goals has nothing to do with discipline. The real culprit is friction, and it slowly erodes your progress. Unlike what most people
earlier, lurking behind the trees, finally speaks. From now on, we'll refer to this character as Showbear.
You must be so confused about what you saw. Don't be scared, my little bunny. Answers will be given eventually, but don't try to solve this puzzle only with the pieces you have so far. This is only the beginning. For I'm going to tell you a story of broken people, beautiful people. He is so sorry about what he did to them, but there's nothing he can do. Remember that. Safety and pills, Sophie. 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 Safety and pills. 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 Sophie.
Just as he begins to talk, his voice is abruptly cut off by a loud, distorted version of Heartaches. At this moment, the soul trapped inside the Bond animatronic makes its presence known.
Oh, can't you see? I made them beautiful. I don't know how. I didn't even mean to. But I did. They try to talk to us. Through analog, they will be heard. This is their cry for help. Besides, they want us to know what happened that year. But we must be patient. Look. They are filled with life. They dance to the music. They laugh and sing along. They're perfect. They are beautiful. They will see you soon, Sophie.
From this, several things become clear. First, and in case it wasn't already obvious, Bond is being possessed by a sadistic, psychopathic killer who is obsessed with murdering certain people to make them beautiful, just like him. The line, "They will see you soon, Sophie," is not just a chilling remark, it's a direct threat. As we've seen before, one of Bond's primary goals seems to be ending Sophie's life, though his true motives remain unknown. Meanwhile, the lines, "Through analog they will be heard," and "This is their cry for help," confirm what we previously suggested during the appearance of that gray rabbit at the beginning. The victims are trying to reach out through the tapes and similar analog formats, altering and distorting them as a way to make their stories known. We've seen this several times throughout the series already, and we'll keep seeing it again and again, because it's their only way to ask for help. Bunny Farm is the third installment of the WALTIN Files, and just like the previous main episodes of the series, Anthony is back with something to say.
Hey, long time no see, huh? The following footage is about a 1980s video game created by the company. Reason it took me so long to get this footage was because the game never really released to the public, and all footage available was from the beta version of the video game. During October 1982, a few test Bunny Farm machines were distributed around Brighton, Michigan, the city where Bonds opened in June 28, 1974. This footage was from the arcade machine sent to Anfern Hotel. The two girls playing the game seemed to have lived there. The particular thing about these machines was that all footage from the game was recorded and then revised by BSI technicians to see if the game was ready to be published. This was one of them and quite possibly the only footage remaining of this game. The footage itself was extremely corrupted, however, and it took me weeks to be able to
A CRM shouldn't weigh your budget down.
piece everything together with the help of a friend of mine, but I'm glad you've all been patient for this. Seems to be a huge one anyways.
As you just heard, this episode is based on the recording of a gameplay session from a rare beta version of the Bunny Farm video game. And it also marks the first time we meet Sophie Walton and her girlfriend Jenny Lederson, who both live at the Anfern Hotel, the location that received one of these test versions of the game. The first recording takes place on October 15th, 1982, starting with the Bunny Smiles Games logo and a warning indicating the game is still in beta. One brilliant little detail is the main menu theme. It's literally Morse code for SOS, but set to a rhythm. Once again, the souls of the victims seem to be interfering, crying out for help. Jenny, already familiar with the game, decides to show it to Sophie. So Sophie creates a new save file and starts playing. The opening scene of the game introduces us to animated versions of Bon, Sha, Buzu, and Banny as they prepare for the fruit festival. However, they've forgotten to bring any fruit, putting the whole festival at risk of being cancelled. Luckily, Pete the hippo offers to help if the others agree to run some errands for him on his farm. And that's the premise of the game. Everyone agrees, except for Billy, who suddenly appears, screaming his own name out of nowhere and with no context. Just before the gameplay starts, we catch a glimpse of the same shadowy figure we've seen appear in the background of previous episodes. Once the gameplay begins, Jenny teaches Sophie how to control the main character, Bon. She mentions that she's played it quite a bit and has noticed the game feels very unfinished and glitchy. Visual bugs, crashes, strange behavior, which might be expected in a beta version. However, Jenny points out that these glitches are particularly disturbing, and she wanted to show them to Sophie because she knows she's into that sort of thing. As they explore, they come across a memorial statue dedicated to Bobby the hippo, described as the original owner of the farm and father of Pete and Johnny. His birth and death dates are listed as older year and other year. This is an obvious reference to Jack Walton. While Jenny is talking about how bizarre and broken the game feels, Sophie suddenly interrupts her to ask about BSI, saying the name sounds familiar. That's already strange, considering her own father is one of the company's founders. Even more unsettling, throughout the tape, Sophie doesn't seem to recognize any of the animatronics. Something's clearly off, right? But let's not get ahead of ourselves, though some of you probably already know where this is heading. Jenny explains that BSI was recently in the news after an employee named Brian Stells vanished without a trace. She also mentions another worker who supposedly died in an old company bunker. Some say she was secretly buried there, while others believe her body was never removed. These are cases we've discussed before. As they talk about all this, we briefly see Showbear and the Gray Rabbit silently watching Sophie from afar. Clearly disturbed by the topic, Sophie tries to change the subject and launches Billy's minigame instead. During the loading screen, Sophie once again comments on how familiar everything feels. Fragments of memories flash in her mind, but nothing is clear. Everything is just a blur. Eventually, Jenny tells Sophie she has to leave to finish an essay, leaving Sophie alone in the hotel's basement with the game. And that's when things start getting seriously disturbing. All the glitches and distortions in Billy's minigame seem to be connected to Ashley Parks, which makes perfect sense, since Ashley is the one possessing the clown animatronic. The glitches grow more and more unsettling, making Sophie increasingly nervous and uncomfortable. The game becomes nearly unplayable, and at one point we briefly spot two completely red figures in the top left corner of the screen, figures whose true identity will become clearer later on. In the middle of her panic, Sophie bumps into the Gray Rabbit, and the game crashes completely. Shaken and disturbed, she decides to stop playing. For now. The next recording takes place the following day. We're made aware of this as the Gray Rabbit's face slowly appears onto the screen. Then we see the Bunny Farm title screen, while Jenny asks Sophie what happened the day before. Sophie simply says the game crashed and showed her some extremely strange visuals, almost like it was trying to tell her something. Jenny, a bit confused, jokes by asking if Sophie thinks the game is haunted, but quickly admits that something similar happened to her too. Since Sophie is playing the game at night, Jenny suggests they wait until morning to play together, but Sophie just can't get the game out of her head. She insists on staying and playing alone, telling Jenny she can go rest if she wants. After saying goodbye, Sophie enters the save file selection screen, but when she tries to load her game, the screen glitches, showing an error message stating that the save data has been corrupted. It warns that continuing might lead to unknown errors, or even a complete shutdown of the arcade machine. Despite the warning, Sophie refuses to start over, especially if it means replaying what she calls that clown level. So, she decides to keep going, right from where she left off. At one point, Sophie returns to the statue she had seen before, but this time, a completely new message flashes across the screen in the blink of an eye. He promised to take care of the two kids during that day. It's sad that we can't really remember you, Sophie. But soon we'll be together, forever and ever. Rest in peace. The two lovely red children. May 15th, 1962 to May 2nd, 1974. August 22nd, 1965 to May 2nd, 1974. This message references one of the most tragic events in the entire series and the two red figures we saw earlier. But you'll have to wait a bit longer to fully understand this. Eventually, after wandering around for a while, Sophie enters Banny's minigame. In it, Banny, known for her hyperactive, fun-loving, but not so bright personality, disobeys a character named Holly, who appears as a mare. Just because she thinks it's funny, Banny releases 3 pigs that had been locked up. These pigs run off toward the hippo's house, and Sophie's mission is to find them. Several unsettling things happen during this segment, things that are easy to miss at first glance. For instance, there's a brief appearance of Susan Woodings's face on the right side of the hippo's house. There's also a moment where the Bond animatronic can be seen hiding behind some trees, eventually replaced by a white figure wearing a straw hat, standing next to a missing person poster for Jack Walton. That mysterious figure? It's the soul inside Bond. The key clue here is the straw hat, which directly connects it to the Bond we see in the game. If that doesn't sound convincing yet, don't worry. It'll all become clearer very soon. The game starts in a living room, where we see 2 hippo children, Johnny the hippo, Banny, and Holly. At the back of the room are 3 doors, each one secured with a lock. 1 blue, 1 green, and 1 red. But one of the strangest details is in the lower right corner, a table with a lamp and a bottle of pills, a clear reference to Sophie's medication shown at the beginning of the series. After finding the blue key, Sophie unlocks the blue door, which leads her into a dark room with multiple exits. This is the same room from the WALTIN Files 2, where Banny was previously trapped. Sophie, confused, wanders around aimlessly, until the shadowy figure reappears and makes contact with her. Suddenly, she's back in the original room, but now things have changed. The hippo kids now have no eyes, and they're completely still. Johnny is gone, the pill bottle is cracked open, and Banny doesn't move at all. Sophie notices that the red key has suddenly appeared in the upper right corner of the room, next to a photo of Felix Kranken. When she picks it up, Banny's face shifts into a disturbingly strange expression. Sophie walks through the red door, which leads her to a room with a moving conveyor belt, blocking her from reaching the pig on the other side. In order to proceed, she has to solve the puzzle beneath her feet. As she works on it, Sophie remarks that the glitches keep appearing in a very specific way, almost as if something, or someone, is trying to communicate with her. Once she solves it, the screen shows Bond, Banny, Shaw, Billy, and, hidden behind them, the gray rabbit. The image then cuts to a bloodied version of Banny's animatronic face, and then to the employees-only door at Bond's Burgers, the very place where Sophie's mother died. Although, she might not be the only one who met their end in that room. All of this leads to an audio log from Susan Woodings, the person who now inhabits Banny's animatronic body.
BSI Technical Support audio log number 3, June 30th, 1974. Jeremy's birthday party finished an hour ago. I decided to stay and help the employees clean the place. This week has been strange, especially because of the opening. I find it weird that they opened the place even though Mr. Walton disappeared a few weeks ago. I hope he's doing alright. Rosemary came in today and asked if we'd seen him around. I'm pretty worried about it. Felix seems very concerned and worried too. Anyway, the birthday party, yes. Everything went according to plan. This was the first birthday party in the restaurant, and I feel it turned out pretty well. I noticed a few irregularities in the stage and in the audio animatronics. As the engineer and the person who basically built the animatronics to begin with, it was easier to notice these, especially in Bond. Something fell off. The limbs weren't moving properly. They looked stiff and odd, mainly in his right arm. It took a few more minutes to take him to the backstage just to make sure everything's okay. I'm the only one left. Chris left some hours ago, and Felix didn't even show up. I'll leave and close the restaurant when I'm finished. I'm sure it's not going to take long.
What follows is a mini-game showing how Susan died inside the employees-only room. But I won't be showing that here, because we'll soon witness that very event in far greater detail and quality, so you'll have to wait a little longer. After the minigame, Sophie finds herself back at the farm, but now it's much more empty than before. And where Banny used to be, there's now a missing poster for Susan Woodings. The game's music has slowed down, warped, and distorted. Sophie quietly notes that everything happening seems to be tied to some event, but the pills she's been taking are keeping her from remembering.
But that was very confusing and scary, but it felt like I was being told a story or a certain event. I mean, clearly I was, but, yeah. Thing is, the pills have been making me forget a lot of stuff from my teenage years and my childhood, and, like, I started taking them for a reason, but I really don't want to think about it.
Now it all starts to make sense, doesn't it? Her family has been caught in a chain of tragic events, things that would leave a permanent scar on anyone. Her father disappeared, her mother died, and as for her two siblings, I won't spoil that part for those who haven't seen the full series yet. The point is, Sophie is alone. Everyone she loved the most is gone, and what better way to make all that pain disappear than to forget it all? That's why Sophie started taking pills to forget. Now, whether she started taking them on her own or was encouraged by someone else isn't exactly clear. What is clear is that she remembers almost nothing from her childhood and teenage years. All those painful events from her past, completely erased. Back in the game, Sophie approaches the mailbox, which first displays some gameplay tips over a red, glitched out background featuring the soul of Bond. But eventually, everything goes black, and a journal page appears. At the top, we see the name Linda Thompson, but just below it, the last name Crankin is crossed out in red. Linda is Felix's wife, and this shows that she's rejecting her husband's last name. Several pages follow, and while most of them are heavily censored, there are still some key entries worth noting. The first is dated October 30th, 1964. Linda writes that Felix has been acting strangely lately, and she doesn't know what to do. He's been drinking excessively. Another entry from August 23rd, 1965 mentions that Linda had just moved in with Felix, and that the day before, Jack and Rosemary had welcomed their third child, Molly. She also writes that Felix and Jack were pitching their restaurant idea to a company called Cyberfun Tech. On December 26, 1970, Linda describes how Felix and Jack built a doll called Rocket for Ed and Molly. She also notes that Felix drank heavily the day before, and that his alcoholism had already become a serious issue. She emphasizes that Felix is a good person deep down, but that he isn't doing anything to fix the problem, and she feels powerless. On January 3rd, 1973, Linda describes how Felix's addiction has worsened to the point where it's harming both himself and her. She no longer knows what to do. A later page, undated, is written in a tone of complete emotional collapse. Linda says she doesn't know what else to do, she simply can't go on like this. The final entry is dated May 2nd, 1974. Linda writes that she's leaving Felix and moving to Hurricane. She says their relationship was never healthy. At the very bottom, we see an apology from Felix, written in red text. Sophie whispers that she shouldn't be reading this, and at that moment, the game seems to return to normal, though normal might not be the right word anymore. The game resumes, this time with even more changes than before. The most striking one, on the door to the bathroom, where Holly used to stand, there's now an image showing two red figures standing next to a car. It's nothing more than a premonition of what's about to happen. At this point, the background music has vanished completely. All we hear is the sound of Bond's footsteps. Sophie remains mostly silent, in shock, trying to process everything she's experiencing tonight as she walks.
Do I need to tell people I'm on weight loss medication?
Are online companies safe? How will it affect my
walks toward Buzu's minigame. As with the previous games, the glitches and distortions here are directly tied to the person who died and is now possessing the corresponding animatronic. In this case, that's Charles Brooke, computer supervisor at Bunny Smiles and Susan's closest co-worker. Sophie comments that the game is probably trying to tell her something, maybe how these people died. During the minigame, Buzu mentions they have to prepare for Lily's birthday party. Lily is Charles's daughter, which only strengthens the connection. The game also keeps showing the same car with the two red figures, as if desperate to make Sophie remember the accident. At one point, Sophie takes control of Buzu. Here, the game shows us Charles's death at the hands of Bon, just like with the others. But how do we know it was Bon? If you look closely during the loading screen, you can briefly see a pair of bunny ears slowly walking to the right.
Missing 0714, missing 0714, missing 0714, missing 0714, missing 07.
Is kind of starting to make more sense to me. I mean, as much sense as something like this can make. These are all faces of people that I think I knew when I was younger. I knew these people, and for some reason my brain just forgot about them or what happened to them. I doubt they're alive anymore. I mean, maybe they are, but it's unlikely because I would have heard from them by now. And this game really tries to make it seem like these people died. Not in very pleasant ways either. I really don't want to think about it anymore, but Jesus.
After this reflection, the footage shows Sophie preparing to enter Shaw's minigame. In this one, Shaw and Bon are playing hide and seek, and Sophie's goal is to find the animatronic sheep. In the overworld, there are several subtle details worth noting. The presence of Showbear and two gravestones marked E and M, the graves of the two red figures. Sophie chooses to explore the garden, which displays a wide view of the area along with the distorted face of Rosemary. When she returns to the overworld, the red figures are gone, replaced by the gray rabbit, suggesting some kind of connection between the two entities. Sophie ends up selecting the chicken coop, where she finally finds Shaw. But when she clicks on her, we start seeing brief flashes of Rosemary's mangled body, depicted as the Shaw animatronic. Now it's Sophie's turn to hide, and she chooses the forest. But Shaw doesn't take long to find her, and what she's about to show Sophie isn't going to be pleasant.
Am I still beautiful to you? Sophie.
I know you. Found you. Oh.
This is Bree. Her 9 a.m. meetings happen at 9:30. Quick updates take an hour.
Showbear begins to rise from within the well. The scene shifts, placing us in front of the same well with eyes that appeared earlier on the farm map. The well looks around from side to side until it locks eyes directly with the player, with Sophie. Suddenly, Showbear begins to rise from within the well, welcoming her to his magic fountain of memories and asking what she'd like to remember. But before anything else, Sophie asks him who he is. She receives no answer. Instead, Showbear begins to show her the tragic accident that took place on May 2nd, 1974. Sophie is about to uncover a dark truth, one that has been buried deep within her mind. And as a result, many elements that have appeared throughout the game finally start to make sense. The game shows an image of a house, with the two red figures standing at the front door. Sophie is stunned and terrified. This is her old house, the one she lived in with her family, before everything fell into darkness. Next, we see a corn maze with Showbear lurking in the shadows at the far end, followed by the gray rabbit. The rabbit says he's happy to see Bon and thanks him for helping clean up the maze. He tries to tell Bon what to do next, but he's interrupted by the sound of a ringing phone. We're then shown a conversation between Felix and Jack. Jack asks him for a favor, to take his kids, Ed and Molly, to a school party that evening. Jack is swamped with paperwork, and Rosemary is at the dentist with Sophie, so he can't go himself. Though hesitant at first, Felix eventually agrees. Jack thanks him warmly and asks him to pick them up at 5 p.m. and bring them home by 9 p.m. As the call ends, Sophie quietly remarks that somehow she remembers that conversation. The scene changes again, this time to a minigame set in the corn maze where Sophie once again controls Bon. During this sequence, Showbear's deep voice warns her to be careful. This memory is deeply buried, and she must find them. As Sophie explores, she speaks to herself aloud. She's overwhelmed. She says she knows what's happening now, that she's beginning to recognize all the faces she's seen, and this is where everything begins to unravel. Ed and Molly Walton, 11 and 8 years old respectively, are shown in their bedroom, getting ready for Uncle Felix to pick them up. Suddenly, Felix appears behind them, asking if they're ready. Molly doesn't want to leave without her favorite doll, the gray rabbit, which now, finally, we can name Rocket. After that, the three get into the car and head to the party. The day goes by without anything unusual happening, but it's already past 9 p.m. and time to go home. Ed and Molly go looking for Felix and find him at a bar, drinking. The kids call him out. He shouldn't be drinking if he's going to drive them home, but Felix brushes it off, saying he's fine, just a little dizzy, and gets up, ready to drive. A terrible mistake. Felix makes a fatal decision, one that will haunt him for the rest of his life, because in the crash that follows, he's the only one who survives.
Uncle Felix, were you drinking?
M.Y.
I just want to lay in the bed.
Today.
Is that gunfire I'm hearing?
Well, it ain't popcorn. You think I blew a
Panicked and lost, he buries Ed and Molly's bodies in Santa Juana Forest, but they found a way to come back, by possessing Rocket. Then, the screen goes black as the phone rings again. Jack is desperately calling Felix, but he doesn't answer. The machine starts playing back 25 voicemails, one after another. Finally, the video cuts to a scene showing the player character, Bon, but this time, without a face, interacting with the members of the Showstoppers. But then something breaks the illusion. Bon's animatronic version appears. Wait, weren't we playing as Bon? This doesn't make any sense. Or maybe it makes perfect sense. Here's my interpretation. What we're seeing is a lost soul looking for a vessel to possess. It observes all the animatronics, but none of them seem right, until it finds Bond and takes him. The fact that this version of Bond has no face makes it even clearer. At this point, he didn't have an identity yet, at least not one we could recognize. Still, that's just my take. What do you think? Let me know your theories down in the comments. And with that, we've reached the end of the WALTIN Files 3. Guilty is a hidden video whose link can be found by piecing together the two parts shown throughout the WALTIN Files 3. The video opens with the Bunny Smiles Incorporated logo, followed by 3 archived audio recordings, each one from the same person, Felix Kranken. The first recording, dated April 15, 1967, features Felix formally introducing himself, alongside Jack Walton, as a co-founder of the company. He explains that Bunny Smiles was built on a single belief, that with hope, anything is possible. He believes in his company. He believes in his dream. The second recording, from December 10, 1972, shows Felix delivering a holiday message to his employees, wishing them a Merry Christmas and expressing pride in the company's achievements. But the most important audio tape comes next. Although partially censored, it's titled Guilty and is dated May 2, 1974, the same day as the accident. Here, we hear a deeply remorseful Felix. Sadly, the past can't be undone.
Alright, yeah. Messed up. It's been so long since I last used one of these. Last time I used this, I was driving. In the same conditions. I messed up. I have a problem. And this has been a problem for so long that I can't even remember. The first time I got drunk, I don't remember most stuff. That's probably why I carry this recorder with me. So, that's probably why I'm recording this in the first place. Because I know I'll wake up tomorrow and I'll think this was all just a nightmare. That Ed and Molly are okay. But they're mad. They're not. They were just children. Jack. Oh God, what am I gonna tell Jack? He would be devastated.
What's wrong? Are you having issues responding to clients?
Yeah, I just can't handle the amount of work. How do you do it?
Well,
That's why I buried him. Just the idea of Jack seeing what happened to him. Jack's been the best friend I've ever had. I'd never do that to him. That's when the accident occurred. I just panicked and I buried him in the forest. St. Juana's forest. The forest next to the road. The road in which the accident occurred. I can't remember where I buried him. So fucked. What am I gonna do now? The restaurant's gonna open next month. Sorry.
Next, we have a mini episode titled Spectacle. In it, a reporter named Christine Marshall stands in front of a now shuttered Bond's Burgers, reporting on the location's dark history and the string of disappearances linked to the restaurant and the BSI company. Christine works for Local 57 a news channel whose name is clearly inspired by the analog horror series Local 58. During her report, Christine interviews a mother who knew one of the employees who used to work there. The woman explains that her coworker had gone to Bond's Burgers to celebrate a birthday, and at the time didn't believe any of the paranormal rumors that were already starting to spread about the place. As she speaks, we see various shots of the restaurant, intercut with fragments from the old Bond's Burgers commercial. Later on, Christine interviews Derek Collins, chief detective of the Brighton Police Department. He begins recounting the 6 disappearances that occurred during the summer of 1974. Jack, Rosemary, Edward, and Molly Walton, Charles Brooke, and Susan Woodings. He then mentions that Jack Walton's disappearance was the breaking point, the moment he realized something was seriously wrong. However, he also voices his frustration with Local 57 for what he sees as turning the case into a media circus, connecting the disappearances to alleged paranormal activity, which, in his view, only spreads misinformation and preys on public curiosity. But the facts remain disturbing. Christine continues her report, citing various incidents tied to the restaurant: loud music playing late at night, car alarms going off, lights turning on inside, and the eventual closure of the establishment. After it was shut down, the building was declared condemned, and no one has attempted to purchase it due to the urban legends surrounding it. Even so, there have been reports of break-ins and acts of vandalism on the property. Witnesses claim they heard the chilling screams of an adult woman the night before the restaurant's final shutdown. Yet when police arrived and forced their way inside, the place was empty. People believe those screams came from Rosemary Walton, and they're not wrong. The video ends frozen on a still frame as Rosemary's muffled cries for help echo in the background. She's still there. Cyberfun Tech is the title of the 4th episode of the WALTIN Files, and it marks a major turning point in the series. Unlike the previous chapters, this one adopts a much more cinematic approach to storytelling and features a stunning visual upgrade. It also serves as the beginning of a trilogy, this episode being the first of 3 parts still to be released. But first, as always, let's hear what Anthony has to say.
Back when I found the Bunny Farm tapes, I was met with a dead end. Bunny Smiles Incorporated and Bond's Burgers gave no more results. Locals
Want next level pay? Get next level skills.
Jobs with digital skills pay better, much better.
True fact. The word
had no more info. I went back to Connecticut to live with my dad. That was until my friend David approached me with an amazing find. David decided to ask locals about the terms Walton instead. Apparently that's a name that pops up a lot in the tapes. Haven't watched the tapes myself. We were directed to a vintage strip mall that had this one bowling alley, Starley's. Originally there was a workshop in that building instead, and when they moved everything out and Starley's bought the space, one locker remained labeled Walton. Inside a box with a cheap safe, apparently the box has sat there for decades because they haven't managed or bothered to open it. Me, Ron, and David did some digging through the previous tapes and noticed a pattern. The code was 722. Curious. Inside, there were a total of 23 tapes. I moved back to Brighton, Michigan to help my friends fix, clean, and compile these tapes into what we call the Cyberfun Tech Collection. This is part 1 of 3. Cyberfun Tech is a company that funded and created most BSI projects. It's unclear whether CT owned BSI or whether they were simply partner companies, but perhaps CT bought BSI at some point. Either way, all the tapes were labeled Cyberfun Tech, and supposedly these were supposed to be handed over to technicians and artists. I should note, some bits of this compilation are weird. On some screens it would appear as minutes and minutes of empty static, and on other screens it would appear to be a white screen with faint voices heard on them.
The episode begins with the school party scene we first saw in the WALTIN Files 3, but this time it's reimagined with the series' brand new visual style, immediately showcasing how much the production has improved. As the siblings approach the adults' area to find Felix, the environment suddenly shifts. Everything turns white, and for a few brief seconds, we see a strange location that we'll explore in more detail later on. The tape then cuts to the Bunny Smiles Incorporated logo, followed by a view of Bond's Burgers storefront, and then a scene of Bond dancing and entertaining the guests just before the Cyberfun Tech logo appears. From there, the footage begins to rewind, repeating several of the earlier shots, including another glimpse of that strange location, this time showing what seems to be Felix's car. Sophie also flashes on screen for a moment, though it's impossible to tell where she is or what she's doing. Next, we see a disturbing baby doll lying on the floor in front of cardboard cutouts of the showstoppers, with the words Cyberfun Tech written beside it. A menu then appears with 4 available videos. The first one to play is Bond's Burgers promo. Upon selecting it, we see an image of an employee logbook from BSI, followed by an entry written by Charles Brooke on October 10th, 1970. In it, Charles says he's just been hired as the computer supervisor for the Bunny Smiles restaurant, which, at that point, still didn't have a name. Right away, we sense his excitement. He's eager to get started and already thinking of potential names for the place. What's interesting is that Charles isn't a newcomer. He says he's known everyone for a long time and had worked alongside Susan and the rest of the team for years, even before Cyberfun Tech existed. He considers them family. We then transition to a musical sequence featuring the showstoppers, each performing a song. Buzu sings Tiptoe Through the Tulips in an animated garden scene. Then Banny performs Drift Away while gleefully hopping across a hill. Finally, Shaw sings Sweet Music, surrounded by flowers in her segment. However, during her performance, the tape starts glitching, and for a moment we catch a glimpse of the employees-only door backstage. Next up is Bond performing I Can't Feel Anything, but just as his animated sequence begins, a red square suddenly appears, censoring part of the screen. For a split second, we can make out a white figure, which, given what we've seen before, is none other than Bond's soul. Interestingly, the song title, I Can't Feel Anything, might be a subtle reference to the fact that Bond feels no remorse for the horrific murders he's committed. The next scene introduces us to the endoskeleton of Shaw's animatronic, identified as CBF-72, which begins to move as a new character, Cybertelly, appears. Cybertelly is an animated mascot who explains the technology developed to bring Bond's Burgers to life. We're then given a brief history of the showstoppers,
A CRM shouldn't weigh your budget.
along with a shot of the restaurant's sign. The footage glitches again for a moment, and Bond's soul briefly reappears before the narration continues. And to avoid repeating this constantly, it's worth noting that this happens numerous times throughout the episode. Cybertelly starts talking about the showstoppers concept art, but he's suddenly interrupted by a jarring tape glitch that cuts to a series of early sketches made by the BSI art department, with Rosemary Walton credited as the lead artist. A curious detail: there's a cut right before Cybertelly is about to mention that Rosemary is married to Jack Walton. Next, we hear a voice recording of Rosemary explaining that her goal when designing the characters was to make them visually appealing to children and easy to remember. We then see Shaw performing once again while Susan Woodings narrates the relationship between BSI and Cyberfun Tech. Initially, Cyberfun Tech was only contracted to build the animatronics, but eventually, a deeper partnership was formed. Susan starts discussing her role as BSI's lead engineer, but the narration is abruptly cut again, this time showing several photos of the restaurant's interior. Susan continues, detailing the technological features implemented in the animatronics, such as free movement and the ability to interact with customers. The tape goes on to show several shots of incomplete animatronics, all set to the background music of Claire de Lune, interspersed with the steady sound of loud banging. Eventually, we see a distorted image of Susan's face alongside an inverted letter addressed to Felix Kranken, written by Norman Poultrick, the owner and newly appointed CEO of Cyberfun Tech.
Mr. Kranken, this is Norman. I'm sending you this letter on behalf of our deal between Bunny Smiles and Cyberfun staff, and most importantly, the well-being of our Cyberfun staff. We've been getting a lot of complaints about a member of our staff going missing who was highly associated with you and your team. Susan Woodings has been missing for a week now, and here in Cyberfun Tech we are working as hard as we can to try and manage to get in contact with her. Is there perhaps any detail you could hand us to help locate our missing employee? I'm going to be entirely honest with you. Mr. Kranken, If there's anything that could help us find Susan, write us back immediately. Thank you. I'll see you Monday.
Right after this, the screen turns blue and Bond briefly appears. The episode continues with brief flashes of previously seen footage of Shaw before transitioning into a tutorial on the CT console, a data storage device created to manage the functions and programming of the animatronics. Next, we see a written note from Charles Brooke, where he discusses the console's technological breakthroughs and the early tests conducted with it. The system was designed to make the animatronics feel more lifelike, offering a more immersive experience for guests at the restaurant. Charles describes the project as ambitious and groundbreaking, even admitting he never thought he'd be capable of developing something like this in his lifetime. It's interesting how much he praises Susan's work, clearly someone he holds in high regard. According to Charles, her contributions were spectacular and delicate, impressive enough to capture the admiration of both Jack and Felix, though in very different ways. Jack is fascinated, likely excited about the possibilities this innovation could bring. Felix, on the other hand, seems amazed, but also afraid, to the point where he admits he doesn't even understand how the technology works. After this, we're shown a second note, much more technical in tone, documenting the test results from.
Staring at a long list of tasks won't suddenly make you productive. It could actually be the roadblock preventing you
from the animatronics' first 2 weeks of operation. The mood shifts. This is no longer an enthusiastic journal entry, but rather a log of bugs and progress reports. During the first week, Banny exhibits erratic behavior, at one point even flipping over a table, which leads to a complete reprogramming of her environmental awareness system. Bond, in contrast, immediately recognizes Sophie, indicating that his identification system is functioning correctly. There's also a test involving Buzu, whose magic trick is mostly successful, though with some noticeable deterioration, something they hope to refine in future trials. By the second week, Banny appears to have been successfully repaired. However, a recurring issue becomes apparent. The animatronics' masks keep breaking, not just once, but several times, creating an urgent need for replacements. The tape quickly transitions to the startup screen of the CT console system. A new recording begins, dated January 21st, 1974, titled Walk Around Test. In it, we hear Susan and Charles talking about a patrol test. This is the exact moment Charles was writing the notes we saw earlier. The test is conducted from Banny's point of view. Susan explains that the animatronic must walk toward them without tripping over any obstacles. Everything seems to go well, until, just as we saw in the notes, Banny crashes into a table and knocks it over, forcing them to end the test. We then move to the next recording, Facial Tracking, dated March 27th, 1974. In this segment, Susan and Charles discuss Felix's absence. Susan, clearly resigned, assumes he's out drinking again. She brings up his alcohol addiction and how neither Jack nor Rosemary realize how serious it has become. Charles is shocked to learn that even Chris Easteryear, another employee at Bond's Burgers, knows about it, but both agree to drop the topic and continue with the test. The camera now switches to Shaw's perspective as she undergoes the facial recognition test. Charles seems a bit puzzled since they remember doing a similar test with Ed and Molly that went smoothly. Susan clarifies that the console has issues recognizing certain faces, so they'll be repeating the procedure. Seizing the opportunity, Susan casually asks Charles how Lily, his daughter, is doing. He replies that she's spending the weekend with her mother. The test begins. We see how the system works. It first compares the subject's eyes, nose, and mouth with preloaded reference graphics. Then it scans the full outline of the face and combines both sets of data to search for a match in the database. Shaw successfully identifies both Susan and Charles, filling them with relief and joy. Charles jokes that he's earned himself a beer, reminding Susan once again of Felix's alcoholism. Suddenly, the tape cuts to the inside of Felix's house, where we see Molly Walton's spirit, accompanied by the repetitive sound of a skipping vinyl record. The next recording begins shortly after, dated May 13th, 1974, 11 days after the accident. Susan and Charles discuss the incident. The funeral has already taken place, attended only by close family. Charles wonders how Jack is coping with the loss, as no one has heard from him in a while. The two begin to suspect that Felix hasn't told them everything, especially after learning that he hid Rocket inside the restaurant, something he didn't want Jack or Rosemary to know. The mood grows tense, and they decide to leave, leaving Rocket behind in the room. But just then, Rocket starts moving toward Buzu and initiates a facial recognition scan. The system detects nothing at first, which makes sense. Rocket doesn't have any human facial features. But then, inexplicably, Buzu appears to recognize Ed and Molly inside Rocket. All of this happens while a reversed message plays in the background. After that, the final tape in the sequence plays, titled The First, dated June 30th, 1974. In it, we hear Susan Woodings recording the same audio diary we heard back in Bunny Farm. So many of you probably already know what's coming. Here it is.
Oh no! Help me! Please help me!
Oh, no! Don't move.
Following Susan's death, the scene fades out and transitions to midnight on May 3rd, 1974. Jack Walton is driving furiously down a road, heading toward Felix Kranken's house. He pounds on the door in a rage, screaming Felix's name, but receives no answer. We see a man completely consumed by desperation. He tries peeking through the window, threatening to kill Felix if he did anything to Ed or Molly. The image becomes distorted and static-filled as Jack begins slamming on the glass, overwhelmed with rage. Then we shift to the morning of the same day, deep in the Santa Juana forest. Felix is seen sitting at the bottom of a large pit beside the graves of Ed and Molly. The tape briefly shows the car accident. Molly's body lies in the back seat, while Felix is unconscious at the wheel. his head slumped against the blaring horn. Back in the present, Felix climbs out of the hole, carrying Rocket, Molly's backpack, and one shoe. He tosses the bag and the shoe off a cliff, but keeps Rocket, likely trying to destroy the evidence. He then slowly approaches the edge. Guilt is eating him alive. And yet, just as he was too cowardly to face his addictions, he's also too cowardly to take his own life and pay for what he's done. But maybe that's for the best. Living with this torment is a far worse punishment than simply fading away. The tape continues with an audio journal recorded by Felix on May 5th. In it, he confesses to having told Jack and Rosemary what happened. Felix describes it as the longest hour of his life and the most painful conversation he's ever had. Now, both of them hate him. In fact, he says, he hates himself, and understandably so. He admits he hasn't been able to sleep, haunted by the knowledge that the children's bodies are still buried in the woods. He says he doesn't know what to do with Rocket. He can't get rid of him, because no matter where he goes, the doll follows. He describes Rocket as a constant reminder of his mistake. The tape then returns to the employees-only room right after Susan's death. Here we see Bond placing her body inside Banny's animatronic shell. But before continuing, let's pause to briefly examine the cause of her death. Some parts of the series suggest that Susan died of starvation, but that doesn't add up. She's clearly murdered by Bond in this moment. Or maybe not. It's possible that Susan was still alive after the attack, but left completely paralyzed after Bond snapped her neck. Although alive, she was gravely wounded, barely able to breathe, and with her stomach feeling strange, likely due to internal damage. This could explain why she felt like she was starving to death in her final moments. As Bond continues inserting Susan's body into Banny's suit, Rocket watches from the corner, helpless to stop him. We're then taken back to the strange, ethereal realm we glimpsed at the beginning of the episode, a white, surreal space known as Wonderland, a haunting kind of limbo for souls who died with unfinished business. Here we see Ed and Molly in spirit form. Molly tells her brother that she wants to find Susan and help her. Ed hesitates, but ultimately agrees. Meanwhile, Susan wanders the same realm, crying out for help. In the distance, we hear someone whistling, drawing closer. It's none other than the soul of the merciless, psychopathic killer who took her life.
Susan, I'm here.
Where are you? Please, where am I?
Don't you worry. You're in safe hands, Susan. Welcome to Wonderland, your new home. Isn't it beautiful?
Am I
dead? No. Not yet, at least. Your heart is still beating, but your body is now functionless. Out there, you're slowly suffocating, but here, you're safe. The spirit doesn't pass on quite as fast as the body does. I would know.
Who are you?
Oh, where are my manners? Pleasure to meet you.
And you're Susan. I've had my eye on you. I know you very well, my friend. I know you like to fix things, isn't that right? Well, so do I. Wouldn't you like me to fix you?
What are you talking about?
Perhaps I could help you. Here, a gift. Take a look inside.
I don't understand.
That is the new you. A wonderful gift that will eventually become your new body. Just like a beautiful butterfly bursting from a cocoon. You will be reborn.
What does this mean?
You don't have to listen to me. That is...
Yeah, AI chatbots are actually super exciting, but I'm sorry, we'd rather not introduce them. We don't have...
Up to you. But what other choice do you have? A spirit can't survive without being tethered to a vessel. I know you're scared. I was too. But everything will be okay.
I don't...
Apologies for what I had to do to you. But look, the hard part is over with now. Besides, you can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs.
We've finally reached the last available video, Lacrimosa, a hidden entry belonging to the WALTIN Files 4, which, like all the others, can be found scattered throughout the episode. The title is a direct reference to Mozart's Lacrimosa, the same piece that played during the infamous Rabbit is Starving scene in the Relocation Project tapes. So naturally, the presence of both Banny and Susan is guaranteed here, and this time, that disturbing scene is shown in far greater detail. The video's description gives us some intriguing context. Felix Archer Kranken reportedly arrived at the station in the morning on May 3rd. He had a broken pair of glasses, dirty blue pants, and a yellow dress shirt stained with dirt and blood. By the time I got the call, he was already in custody. We sat him down for a few hours, and he revealed valuable information about a case we had just been told about earlier that same day by Mr. Jack Walton. Walton's two youngest children, Ed and Molly Walton, had disappeared with Kranken the night before. Felix's alibi claimed he'd been unconscious for about 20 minutes after the crash, and when he woke up, the kids were gone. The video opens on the banks of the Clear Hill River, where the Brighton Police Department is investigating the disappearance of Edward and Molly Walton. One of the children's shoes floats gently in the water, until the footage suddenly glitches and transitions into a different tape. This new tape briefly recaps what we already know about the CT console, information previously mentioned in Charles Brooks' notes. But then, without warning, the footage cuts abruptly to the remains of Susan Woodings trapped inside the now headless Banny animatronic, moments after she was attacked by Bon. In the background, we hear a voicemail from Charles Brooke, expressing sorrow over his missing friend. He says she was last seen on June 30th, though he's unsure of the date due to being ill at the time. As Charles speaks, we see Bon forcing Banny's head onto Susan's twitching body. Shockingly, she appears to still be alive. All of this unfolds while the soul of Bon, whom we can now identify as also being Bon, stares directly at us from a nearby shelf. Slowly, his face grows larger until it fills the entire screen, and then fades to black. Afterward, the tape displays a map of the backstage, now strangely merged with Wonderland. This might be a sign that Susan has died for good, and her spirit is now fully trapped inside Banny. Suddenly, we see her begin to rise. She's breathing heavily, agonizingly, as she stumbles through the dark, empty halls of Bon's Burgers. Room after room, she walks through a seemingly endless maze, until she encounters an old CRT television. On screen is the corner of a room filled with static noise. Eventually, a shadowy figure appears, interrupting the signal. From the darkness, Bon watches her every move. As she approaches, a deep, guttural voice urges her to follow it. A door opens, leading into Wonderland. Perhaps everything we've seen has been taking place there, rather than in the physical world. Before Susan can react, Bon appears.
Is that gunfire I'm hearing?
Well, it ain't popcorn.
Right in front of her, this time headless, part of his endoskeleton exposed, with glowing eyes piercing through the darkness. And just like that, the video cuts to black, marking the end of all currently available content. Alright, it's time to talk about this in more depth. What really happened to Jack Walton? We don't actually know. I mean, he's the first person we ever hear about going missing, and we assume he's dead, but ironically, he's the one we know the least about. There are countless theories floating around out there, but none of them feel truly conclusive to me. On one hand, a lot of people believe Jack's soul is the one possessing Bon. That's pretty much what everyone thought at the start of the series. But that theory kind of falls apart the more you look at it. Not only does the entity inside Bon look nothing like Jack, and openly refer to itself as Bon, but their personalities are completely different. One is a sadistic, psychopathic killer, while the other was, at least on the surface, a hardworking father and seemingly good person who would have done anything for his kids. And yet, the fact that Bon almost always shows up right around the time Jack appears on screen, it's a clue that basically screams at you. They're connected somehow. Some have speculated that Jack's soul might be trapped within the tapes themselves, but I don't really buy that either. Most of his appearances seem to be the souls of Ed, Molly, Rosemary, Susan, and Charles trying to jog Sophie's memory, pushing her to remember what happened to her father. Maybe I'm wrong and there's something more going on, but at this stage, any theory we can come up with feels a bit premature, especially considering that, believe it or not, the series is only just beginning. Then there's Find Jack Walton, a website entirely dedicated to his disappearance. It's full of interesting information, plus some hidden links that lead to other pages. If enough people ask for it in the comments, then in addition to the upcoming video on the non-canon episodes, I'll also make one where I dig into everything that can be found on findjackwalton.com. But for now, we reach the end. A restaurant, murders, security guards, possessed animatronics. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? The analog horror series I bring you today is deeply inspired by Five Nights at Freddy's, but don't let that fool you. This series stands out with its incredible visual and narrative quality within the analog horror format, making it a truly enjoyable experience. Created by Camtasia Studios, The Winterland Incident is a brand new series that has just begun. So far, it only has one available episode, along with a teaser for the second one, which is currently in production. And that's exactly what we'll be analyzing and breaking down today. Throughout the video, I'll also try to point out every FNAF reference I come across. I think that could be fun. On another note, this series is actually a reboot of a previous version that Camtasia Studios had created in the past. So if you'd like me to make a video explaining and analyzing the original series, or if there's another series in this style you'd like me to cover, make sure to support this video as much as possible, and I'll bring it to the channel as soon as I can. Before we begin, I'd like to thank everyone who responded to the pinned comment in the last video and for all the support you always give me. Remember, if you want to be featured in the next video, just reply to the pinned comment where you'll find the following question. What do you think of this analog horror series, and what are your expectations for its future? Without further ado, don't forget to leave your precious like and subscribe to help the channel grow and reach more people. Every like is one more coin to escape poverty. If you're not sure what to comment, just type meow in the comment section and I'll give you a heart in return. Comments are super important and help the video a lot, so don't forget to leave yours. Welcome to the Winterland incident.
Magnificent. Now, these designs clearly are masterpieces, sir. Besides appealing to children, they can also entertain adults. Specifically, the infamous Polar Poo. He looks so lifelike, so alive. But how?
With technology, of course. We've managed to bring these characters to life by using the latest generation animatronic technology.
That makes sense. But what I'm talking about is a different feeling. Like this character has a soul. It's no wonder you've risen so far in the entertainment industry, Mr. Graves.
It all starts with a rather intriguing interview. We see a journalist admiring the designs of the restaurant's animatronics, and from the very beginning, it's clear just how impressed he is. The journalist also mentions something interesting. These characters don't just attract children, they entertain adults as well. This tells us a lot about the company's target audience. At this point, the journalist highlights Polar Poo, and this is where the things start to get unsettling. He describes the animatronic as incredibly realistic, so much so that it almost feels alive in some way. Suddenly, a mysterious voice chimes in, and while we don't immediately know who it belongs to, it's eventually revealed to be someone named Mr. Graves, one of the most important characters in this entire story. His response is quick and to the point, with technology, of course. This line is significant because, while it tries to offer a rational explanation, it doesn't quite match the strange feeling we're starting to pick up on. And considering the story this series draws inspiration from, we can already suspect that there's more to this than meets the eye. Mr. Graves goes on to explain that they used cutting-edge animatronic technology to bring these characters to life. But the journalist isn't satisfied. Something still doesn't sit right with him. He talks about a different kind of feeling, as if these animatronics had a soul. In the end, the journalist acknowledges Mr. Graves' success in the entertainment industry. But for us, the audience, it's already clear that something is very wrong here. And as a fun fact, this entire sequence is clearly inspired by the intro of Sister Location.
She can take song requests. She can even dispense ice cream.
With all due respect, those aren't the design choices we were curious about, Mr. Afton.
As you can see, even the structure is almost identical. The first tape, titled Company Story 1978, shows us a newspaper clipping from June 22nd, 1973. The text is only partially readable, but it strongly resembles the kind of articles we've seen in FNAF. In it, we can make out the full name of Mr. Graves, Walter Graves, who, along with someone named Freddie, founded an establishment called Wendy's Waffles, a restaurant, as we'll later see, that also features the animatronic Polar Poo. Two friends teaming up to open a restaurant with animatronics? I wonder where I've heard that before.
Want next level confidence? Get next level skills.
Most jobs now need digital skills. So where do
After this, we're introduced to a sort of television program where a puppet named Windkit enthusiastically tells us the story of the founding of Winterballs Entertainment. With his contagious energy, he invites us to follow along and see how it all began. Windkit mentions the two great founders of the company, Freddie Burton, and just as he's about to say the second name, the recording distorts and cuts off. But right before the interruption, we hear Windkit start to pronounce the first syllable of the other founder's name. which finally confirms his identity: Walter Graves. Of course, we already knew this thanks to the newspaper clipping from earlier. Given the clear parallels to FNAF and the distortion just before revealing Walter Graves' full name, the story is already dropping some pretty obvious hints about the role this man is likely to play. After this technical difficulty, WinKit goes on to tell us that Winter Balls Entertainment was founded in 1969 in Langside, Minnesota. Thanks to a collaboration with Techtail Engineering, they managed to open their first business, Wendy's Waffles. As the screen distorts once again, we catch a glimpse of Walter Graves' silhouette in the background, smiling in a way that can only be described as sinister. The tape then reveals information about a project called Winter Wonderland, a theme park designed by Walter Graves in 1972. Although the park couldn't move forward to the construction phase due to financial difficulties, the project was later revived by Walter with the help of financial partners after the tragic death of Freddie Burton. The park was renamed Walter's Winter Wonderland in honor of Walter's supposed success. The general idea was to create a park with smaller attractions surrounding a castle, with larger entertainment rides at the center, all planned to be built in a forested area on the outskirts of Langside town. Fortunately, or perhaps unfortunately, the park turned out to be an overwhelming success, doubling its budget in just 1 week. Given what we're starting to understand about Walter's character, it's hard not to feel like something is very wrong with all of this. I mean, reviving a project you started with your business partner right after his death and taking all the credit? Something definitely doesn't add up. Right after this, we're shown a memorial tape dedicated to the memory of Frederick Burton. In it, Walter Graves reflects on the loss of his dear friend and how difficult it was for him and those close to Freddie. It's clear that Freddie was a beloved and respected figure, someone with big plans and ambitious projects. Walter specifically mentions Project Wendy's Waffles, and while he expresses pride in what they accomplished, Freddie's absence still weighs heavily on him. Even so, as Walter himself says, the show must go on. All of this would seem heartfelt if it weren't for the sinister, almost maniacal laugh Walter lets out right before the recording ends. Could it be that Walter had a hand in Freddie's death? Oh, and that photo you see on the table, it's directly inspired by one from Chuck E. Cheese.
Losing Freddie was hard. My friends and I shared lots of memories with him since our college years. We had so many plans together, so many projects. Now, seeing what we did, Project Wendy's Waffles makes me feel proud of us. I think we nailed it. But now he's gone. And like they always say, the show must go on.
Next, we're introduced to Harold, another close friend and the lead engineer of the company's foundation, along with a shot of the parts and services room filled with various endoskeletons and animatronic heads. Harold's tone is relaxed, almost casual, but it's also filled with genuine admiration for Freddie. He describes him as incredibly intelligent, a man with a brilliant mind for business. Harold reminisces about their college years alongside Walter, Freddie, and Nancy, another friend, mentioning how they all studied different fields but shared a common vision. It's here that we learn something many of us had already suspected. Walter and Freddie were always the closest of the group, almost like brothers. Then we meet Nancy, the lead artist of Winter Balls Entertainment. Her memory of Freddie is far more emotional. She describes him as an incredibly kind and generous person, someone who once gave away all his money to a homeless woman. She also reveals that Freddie often helped his friends pass their college courses and even played a crucial role in her personal life. He was the one who named her son, Michael. Through Nancy's words, we truly feel the depth of Freddie's loss and how much his absence left a hole in their lives. But just when we think Freddie is only a memory, we hear him. In a recording dated January 5th, 1973, Freddie Burton speaks to us directly. He talks about the progress of the Wendy's Waffles project. The restaurant is taking shape, and they're scheduled to test the Polar Poo animatronic on January 10th. He also mentions the costume for the character Wendy Winterballs, which has already had its first test and seems to be working well. However, there's a subtle hint of caution in Freddie's words. While Nancy isn't sure about starting with just one animatronic, Freddie explains that they'll only have one at first due to budget limitations, a decision that could be seen as either a practical move or an early sign of technical and financial struggles. Freddie also briefly mentions the restaurant's menu, adding some everyday details that make this recording feel even more authentic and, at the same time, incredibly tragic, knowing what we now know about his fate. Suddenly, the recording cuts out, and through the static, we catch a glimpse of a strange silhouette standing next to a photo of Walter Graves. Given everything we've seen so far, it wouldn't be too far-fetched to think that this could be the spirit of Freddie himself, making this final sequence feel like a chilling confirmation of Walter's direct involvement in his death. After this recording, we transition to a training tape for Winterballs Entertainment's art department. Here, Nancy Mandela explains her creative process. She mentions that when designing characters, she always consults her children, since the target audience is kids. Specifically, she recalls working on the design for Polar Poo, and how Walter once brought in a child whose feedback ended up shaping the character's final look. Strangely, the child's name is censored, though it's highly likely this was his son, whom we'll later meet as Dustin. At the time, Nancy found it odd that a child was influencing her work, but she admits that the kid's suggestions were actually spot on. This small detail starts establishing a connection between the founder's children and the animatronic characters, something that could carry some very dark implications down the line. The scene then shifts to a recording from January 10th, 1973, where we finally see Polar Poo for the first time. And I don't think I even need to mention who this character's design was clearly inspired by. In this footage, Harold and Nancy discuss the animatronic's readiness for its debut.
Is that thing working?
Yeah, hold on. Yeah, it's working perfectly.
Good. I'm just gonna